I'm Hannah Kaplan, and this is the WCS Wild audio podcast, where you'll find reported audio stories covering the latest news and newsmakers from the Wildlife Conservation Society's Global Conservation Program, Zoos and Aquarium, and their many partners. We've got a great show today, so let's get to it. As Earth Day turns 25 this year, it seemed like a good moment to reflect on WCS's mission to protect wildlife and wild places. Why does the protection of biodiversity carry with it so many other benefits to humankind? What are some of the approaches that work, and what are the challenges? And what can the average person do in their own lives to make a difference? WCS Wild Audio's Nat Moss found just the right person to ask.
My name's Dr. Liz Bennett, and I'm Vice President for Species Conservation at the Wildlife Conservation Society.
Liz Bennett comes to her role as head of the WCS Species Program with decades of experience in the conservation field. As Earth Day hits the quarter-century mark, I wanted to get her thoughts on how this annual celebration relates to wildlife conservation.
Clearly, we need to be working to protect the planet every day, not just one day a year, but having a day for focusing the whole world on protecting the planet, particularly because it often gains the attention of very high-level leaders, can be really important in keeping the planet on people's radars.
Liz spent some 2 decades in Sarawak, Malaysia, where she conducted the first ever detailed study of the proboscis monkey. That landscape was typical of the areas WCS prioritizes for conservation today.
The most critical places that WCS aims to protect are the places that are most intact. They're large areas with a full array of species in very healthy numbers, and that both protects broader biodiversity and all of the ecosystem functions that keep the whole planet healthy. And ecosystem functions basically are things that address the 3 existential crises of the planet today: the loss of biodiversity, the climate crisis that we're all familiar with, and the threat of emerging pandemic diseases. Intact ecosystems with their full complement of species are also very important for retaining local cultural values and supporting local livelihoods.
Liz observes that these intact ecosystems provide innumerable benefits to people. Those ecosystem services, as they're referred to by conservationists, come to us essentially free of charge, she says.
They're not part of the economic system. You can think of them broadly in 4 overall categories. They provide us with resources, such as wood, fish, wild meat, and clean water. They also regulate the environment. They mitigate floods and droughts. They provide clean air and water, and they mitigate against climate change. And third, they support the conservation of critical functions. They conserve biodiversity, and they support soil formation. And they also have very high cultural values. Every culture in the world has species woven into their worldviews in one way or another. And we know that the aesthetic and educational values of natural ecosystems support much higher levels of human mental well-being as well as our physical health. So there's a whole array of different ecosystem services, and we often just don't think about them because they're just there.
The loss of nature undermines the proper functioning of a given ecosystem and the essential services it provides. Liz identifies several key threats, the single biggest being habitat loss and fragmentation.
We all know that most of the areas of wild habitat in the world have been in some way lost to agriculture, to housing, to industry or other uses. Cutting up the habitat by building roads, pipelines, railways, because that disrupts animals moving freely, it disrupts plant dispersal, so that upsets the whole integrity of the system, even if the actual area of the pipeline or road is relatively small.
Then there's overexploitation of species.
Overhunting, overfishing, unsustainable levels of extraction of timber and other plant products, and that again just takes vital resources out of a system and also impacts function.
Liz adds pollution of air and water, which kills species and destroys ecosystem function.
And another one is the spread of alien invasive species. As we've moved different species around the world, either deliberately or accidentally, with globalization, then invasive species in different places can wipe out the existing species.
The Wildlife Conservation Society's focus on protecting species is one way to ensure that they can continue to provide critical ecological functions. Liz shares a couple of examples of animals that help nurture the growth of forests by dispersing seeds.
African forest elephants are a great species to talk about. They're major fruit eaters, so they ingest large numbers of seeds. Those seeds pass through the elephant, they incubate for a while in the elephant's warm insides, and then they come out again in a pile of dung, which acts as a source of fertilizer for those seeds. An average pile of elephant dung can contain up to 1,000 seeds or so of 100 species of plants, so they're critical in maintaining the diversity of the forest and keeping the forest healthy. If we're calling elephants ecosystem engineers in an African forest, then orangutans have been called the gardeners of the forest in Borneo and Sumatra in Southeast Asia. They're predominantly fruit eaters, with a single orangutan eating more than 100 different types of fruit in a year. They're big animals. They've got enormously strong hands, so they can tear open the cases of large fruits which no other animal can get at. So that means that, like the elephants, they're hugely important seed dispersers, dispersing big seeds which smaller animals such as monkeys and birds can't do.
I asked Liz what are some of the strategies that WCS employs to protect species and their habitat.
The first tool that WCS uses is good science to study the needs of the animals, what resources need to be in that area, and how we conserve the corridors and protected areas. The next thing we need to do is work with local communities and government to patrol those areas and protect them. The more patrols you do, the less encroachment you get, the larger the number of animals that are conserved. And the third tactic is working very closely with local communities to reduce any conflict with the animals, which can eat their crops and they can be pretty dangerous at times, and to ensure that they get benefit from living with that type of wildlife.
And while NGOs like the Wildlife Conservation Society work across the globe to implement those approaches, Earth Day is a good moment to focus on what we all can contribute closer to home for the protection of wildlife and wild places. Liz has a few suggestions.
All of us can do something day to day to contribute to the protection of the planet. One is look out for your consumer choices. Don't buy exotic pets. Whatever the label says, you don't know where they've come from, and they could well have come from the wild. We know that the pet trade for exotic pets is one of the major drivers of extinction of a lot of species. But you can also look at your consumer choices, try and minimize stuff that uses oil palm, for example, because oil palm is a major cause of loss of habitat for tigers, orangutans, and many other species. You can join a local natural history group. All communities have got their local conservation groups. They're always looking to volunteers to help clean up their local rivers and get rubbish out of their local parks. And all of these things on a local scale are hugely important. And the slogan is, think global, act local. And we can all do that in our own communities in different ways.
For WCS Wild Audio, this is Nat Moss.
Today's episode was produced and reported by Nat Moss, with help from Dan Rosen and Hannah Kaplan. The WCS Wild Audio Podcast is a production of the Wildlife Conservation Society. Stay tuned for our next episode. And don't forget to follow, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts.